She only meant to leave the food once, one small bowl on the front step, because it was raining and the black and white cat had been sitting on the pavement outside her building for 3 days straight. One bowl, that was the plan. She was not a cat person. She had never owned a cat, and she was absolutely not adopting a stray. But the Tuxedo cat on her doorstep had completely different plans. Emma Calloway was not a cat person. She had never owned a cat. She had never particularly wanted to own a cat. She was 28 years old, living alone in a ground floor apartment on Birchwood Street, and she had a perfectly reasonable life that did not involve animals of any kind. That was fine. That was exactly how she wanted it. Then a black and white cat showed up on her front step and refused to leave. He had been there for 3 days when she first noticed him properly. Not lurking, not hiding, just sitting in the middle of the pavement outside her door with the calm, unhurried posture of someone who had decided this was where he lived now and was simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Tuxedo markings, black across the back and head, white chest, white paws, a thin white stripe running up his nose like someone had painted it on deliberately, yellow-green eyes that watched everything without blinking. The neighbor across the hall had seen him before Emma had. She mentioned it on day 2, casually, the way neighbors mention things they assume will resolve themselves. "There's a cat out there," she said. "Has been since Monday." Emma had nodded and gone inside, and told herself it wasn't her problem. It took her exactly one more day and one rainstorm to decide that it was. On the 3rd evening, it started raining. Emma stood at her window and watched him sit in it. He didn't move, he didn't look for shelter, he just sat there in the rain with the absolute indifference of an animal that had been through worse and was no longer impressed by weather. She put a bowl of food out at 7:43 p.m. She told herself it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. By the end of the first week, she had learned 3 things about him. He ate quickly and completely, every time. He did not approach her while she was outside, but he watched her constantly. And he had positioned himself so that he could see both her front door and the street simultaneously, a detail she noticed on day 5 and could not stop thinking about after. She named him Ace. She told herself naming him didn't mean anything. It meant something. She had not set out to name him, but attention, once given, is difficult to take back. Somewhere between day 5 and day 10, without deciding to, she had started paying attention to Ace the way you pay attention to someone who matters. Here is what most people don't know about tuxedo cats. The black and white coloring is not a breed. It is a coat pattern that appears across many different breeds and mixed cats. But tuxedo cats have a reputation among people who have owned them that is consistent enough to be notable. They are described, repeatedly and independently, as unusually observant, unusually loyal to a single person, and unusually persistent about making their preferences known once they have decided something. Ace had apparently decided something on day 1. It just took Emma a few more weeks to understand what it was. On the 14th day, she left the front door open while she carried groceries in from the car. She made 3 trips. On the 3rd trip, she came inside and found Ace sitting in the middle of her living room, looking around the apartment with the calm, appraising expression of someone doing a final walkthrough before signing a lease. She stood in the doorway, holding a bag of groceries, and looked at him. He looked back at her. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then he walked to the couch, stepped up onto it, turned twice, and lay down. He closed his eyes. He was already done with the conversation. Emma put the groceries away. She did not ask him to leave. She wasn't entirely sure she wanted to. "I see you're still watching, but haven't subscribed yet. Honestly, that stings a little. Hit subscribe. You'll want to see what comes next." The first weeks inside were an education. Ace did not behave like a cat who had been let in from the cold and was grateful for it. He behaved like a cat who had always lived there and was now simply more comfortable. He chose the left side of the couch immediately and did not negotiate about it. He learned Emma's schedule within 4 days and began sitting by the front door approximately 11 minutes before she came home each evening, a fact her neighbor mentioned one afternoon with an expression that suggested she found it slightly unsettling. He did not sit on her lap. He sat beside her, always within arm's reach, always oriented slightly toward her, always aware of where she was in the room. If she moved to the kitchen, he moved to the kitchen. If she went to the bedroom, he was in the doorway within 90 seconds. Not following exactly, more like maintaining a perimeter, staying on the right side of a line he had drawn somewhere that she couldn't see. 6 weeks after he moved in, Emma had a bad night. The kind that arrives from nowhere, settles in by 10 p.m., and makes the apartment feel 3 sizes too large. She was sitting on the kitchen floor because sometimes that is just where you end up. She wasn't crying loudly. She was barely making any sound at all. Ace came in from the hallway. He looked at her for a moment, then he walked over slowly and pressed the full length of his small body against her leg and stayed there. Not purring, not asking for anything, just staying. He had no way of knowing what she needed. He stayed anyway. Emma sat on the kitchen floor with a stray Tuxedo cat she had accidentally adopted 6 weeks earlier, and something she had been holding quietly for a long time finally loosened. He had shown up with nothing, no collar, no history, no way of knowing where he had been. The vet estimated 18 months old, give or take, part of his life on the street, and he had arrived at her door anyway. What she hadn't accounted for in all her careful reasoning about why she was not a cat person and did not want a cat was what it would feel like to be chosen, not asked, not petitioned, just chosen, quietly and without drama, by something that had decided she was worth waiting for. Ace had sat in the rain for 3 days. He had not knocked, he had not begged, he had simply waited, with complete confidence, for her to figure out what he already knew. Ace is 18 months old now, or thereabouts, nobody knows exactly. He still owns the left side of the couch without apology. He still sits by the door 11 minutes before she gets home. He still positions himself in whatever room she is in, always within reach, always watching, always certain of exactly where he needs to be. She left one bowl of food out on a rainy Tuesday evening because she couldn't watch him sit in it anymore. He had completely different plans, and as it turns out, so did she. She just didn't know it yet. Because some cats don't wander into your life by accident. Some of them show up, sit down in the rain, and wait until you figure out they were always meant to stay. Did Ace choose Emma, or did Emma choose Ace? Tell me in the comments.